There is a moment in every powerful man's life where something inside him dies and something else is born. It is the moment he stops expecting the world to care. He stops looking for sympathy. He stops waiting for someone to understand his pain, to validate his struggle, to reward his virtue. In that moment, he sees the world as it truly is, indifferent, brutal, self-serving. And instead of falling into despair, he becomes untouchable. Because once you accept that no one cares, you are free. Free to move without seeking approval. Free to act without begging for praise. Free to suffer without resentment. And that is when everything begins to change. The belief that people should care about you just because you suffer is a child's fantasy. Power begins when you bury that fantasy. When you realize that your pain is yours to carry, and no one is coming to lift it from your shoulders. When you stop asking, "Why is no one helping me?" and start asking, "What can I build from this silence?" In that shift, your posture changes. You stop broadcasting your wounds. You start becoming the kind of man whose silence makes others nervous. And that silence, that refusal to beg for care, becomes a fortress. Machiavelli did not believe in fairness. He believed in reality. And reality is that people care when it benefits them to care. When your pain becomes their opportunity. When your success becomes their ladder. When your failure becomes their entertainment. But they do not care for you. Not truly. Not deeply. And if you build your life expecting them to, you are constructing a palace on a sinkhole. It will collapse. And when it does, they will walk past your ruins without slowing down. The faster you accept this, the sooner you begin to build something indestructible, a life that is not dependent on being cared for, but on being feared, respected, or necessary. It sounds cold, but it is not cruelty, it is clarity. This is where power becomes magnetic. Ironically, when you stop caring whether people care about you, they start to notice you. When you stop trying to be understood, you become intriguing. When you stop begging for loyalty, people chase your approval. Because indifference, real, earned, grounded indifference, is rare. Most men pretend not to care, but underneath, they're seething. The Machiavellian man genuinely doesn't care, not because he's broken, but because he understands how the game works. And everyone else, still hoping to be loved for free, feels that difference. It unsettles them, and what unsettles others commands them. This is the foundation of Stoic power: to suffer without theatrics, to endure without applause, to bleed without an audience. Most people, even the so-called strong, are addicted to emotional performance. They dress their pain in poetry. They hint, they complain, they seek pity disguised as honesty. But the Machiavellian mind knows that every display of suffering is a transaction. And when you keep doing it, people begin to see you as cheap. Every time you show your wound, you lower your value. People stop seeing strength. They see someone trying to be seen. And the moment that becomes obvious, you are finished. This is not to say you must feel nothing. It is to say that you must reveal nothing, unless it serves your strategy. The world rewards strength, not need. And the fastest way to become strong is to act as though no one cares, even if part of you still hopes they might. Because when you act like no one cares, you stop waiting. You stop delaying your evolution. You stop leaning on invisible support and start training your mind to walk through fire alone. That kind of man doesn't need applause. He doesn't need pity. He doesn't even need recognition. He becomes a force, and people feel that force the moment he enters a room. Machiavelli would say, "Stop advertising your hardship. Use it. Every time you're tempted to complain, pause and remember, no one cares. Not deeply, not consistently. And that is not a tragedy. It is liberation. Because once you accept this, you begin to move differently. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to justify your existence. You stop asking for forgiveness. simply for being ambitious, aggressive, or unapologetically focused. You realize that caring too much about being cared for is the softest form of slavery, and freedom begins when you let it go. Think of how many people operate. They shape their identity around being liked. They say what sounds good. They post their struggles in hopes someone will comment, "You're strong." They share quotes about resilience, but melt under pressure. They want the appearance of toughness, but the safety of sympathy. That's not strength, that's decoration. True resilience is invisible. It is the man who walks past you with heavy scars, and no need to explain them. It is the man who doesn't share his pain, because his pain is his weapon. That is the man people begin to fear, then follow. Here is where the Stoic merges with the strategist. When no one cares, your losses become private. Your growth becomes secret. Your ambition becomes surgical. You build in silence. You endure in silence. And then one day you emerge, and no one knows how you got there. Because while they were watching the loud and needy crumble under the weight of ignored expectations, you were becoming a ghost that moves through fire untouched. You didn't need applause. You didn't need pity. You didn't even need company. You needed the silence, because the silence taught you the truth. Power belongs to the man who doesn't beg for care. But this shift is not easy. You will be tempted to reach out, to explain, to seek connection. You will have moments of doubt, moments where your silence feels like suffocation. Good. That means the old part of you is dying. Let it die. Let the part of you that needs to be seen wither. Let the part that rages when ignored fall silent, because underneath that noise is something terrifyingly powerful. The man who moves for himself. The man who rises not because someone lifted him, but because he dragged himself up by sheer force of will. That is the man people remember. Not the one who cried the loudest, the one who didn't flinch. That kind of presence changes rooms. It shifts dynamics. It makes the weak imitate you, even if they don't understand what they're imitating. This is why Machiavelli wrote for those who sought power, not pity, because pity ends when the mood changes. But power, real, silent, indifferent power, stays. When you accept no one cares, you no longer depend on the emotional weather of others. You stop asking for shelter and build a kingdom out of stone. And from that kingdom, you look out not with hatred, but with clarity. You do not need revenge on those who ignored you. You thank them, because their silence helped you find yours. And in your silence, you found yourself. You see, the world doesn't care about your suffering, but it will care about what you become because of it. If you use that truth as a reason to collapse, you will become just another echo in a crowd of complaints. But if you use it as a reason to harden, to sharpen, to rise in silence, then you become the kind of figure Machiavelli admired, untouchable, unpredictable, and unforgettable. And here's the paradox. When you no longer seek care, when you stop needing to be understood or helped or held, you gain influence. People want to be near you. They sense something they don't have: internal authority. The quietness of a man who is not waiting for the world to catch up. The stability of someone who has already buried his need for sympathy. No more exhausting emotional transactions with people who will never understand what drives you. No more begging for trust. You don't ask for trust. You prove yourself. And those who don't see it are left behind. This is not cruelty. It's precision. Strategic abandonment of all dead weight. Because now your mission matters more than your feelings. And that's a critical turn in your journey. Your purpose stops being emotional. It becomes strategic. You don't work just to be fulfilled. You work to conquer. You don't improve just to feel better. You improve to dominate. You don't rise just to be admired. You rise to become essential. That mindset is the difference between the weak and the world shaping. The weak want to be held. The powerful want to be irreplaceable. And when no one cares, the only path forward is to make yourself so competent, so unshakable, so dangerous to ignore, that even the indifferent must adjust themselves around your presence. You stop living for sympathy. You start living for leverage. And here's the most twisted, powerful part of it all. Once you no longer need people to care about you, people start to care, not because they've changed, but because you have. Your detachment becomes gravity. Your silence becomes status. Your refusal to chase makes others chase. Because most people are repelled by neediness, but drawn to indifference, especially when that indifference is earned, not faked. And make no mistake, there is a difference. Fake indifference is loud. It tries too hard. It pretends not to care while constantly peeking to see if anyone noticed. Real indifference is invisible. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't signal. It just moves forward, with or without the audience. And when you carry yourself like that, people start to wonder, what does he know that I don't? Why is he so sure of himself? What did he go through to become like this? They sense that you've seen things, that you've suffered in silence, that you've learned to walk through hell without writing poetry about the flames. And whether they love you or fear you, they cannot ignore you. That is the exact power Machiavelli respected, the kind that doesn't ask for a throne, but makes people nervous when you enter the room, because they feel they might be in the presence of something unbreakable. That's what no one cares really unlocks. Not bitterness, but backbone. You stop crying over what people failed to give you, and start weaponizing what they never could take from you: your dignity, your focus, your momentum. And once those things belong only to you, your power compounds quietly, daily, relentlessly. You stop talking about your moves. You start making them. You stop explaining your standards. You start enforcing them. You stop waiting for the right moment. You become the moment. And still no one will clap. Not at first. Not when you need it. But now that doesn't matter. You've built your machinery without applause. You've suffered without sympathy. And that makes you terrifyingly efficient. Because the ones who succeed without support are the ones who never fall apart when the support vanishes later. That's the secret no one talks about. The world gives applause only after you've proven you no longer need it. And the people who never stop depending on it, they're the ones who collapse the moment the cheers go silent. You won't. You've already lived in silence. You've built in shadows. You've starved your need to be loved. And in that starvation you found your power. So now, when the world finally turns to you, when they finally ask how you survived, you won't need to explain. They'll see it in your eyes. The quiet storm, the refusal to die, the calm that only comes from walking through the fire alone. Because the truth is simple. Once you accept no one cares, you stop needing rescue. You become the storm they thought would break you. And now you are the one that breaks them. By the time you've reached this level of detachment, you're no longer driven by hope. You're driven by inevitability. You don't hope to be seen. You don't hope to be loved. You don't hope to be chosen. All of that was burned out of you in the furnace of silence. And what emerged wasn't a man hoping to be part of the world. It was a man building one in his image. A man who doesn't flinch when he's alone, because he's walked so long without applause that now the silence sounds like home. This is where the Machiavellian mind eclipses the emotional mind completely. Most people are still negotiating with reality. They're trying to get the world to care, trying to get life to reward them for being good, being kind, being loyal. But the world doesn't reward emotion. It rewards effectiveness. And when you finally abandon the delusion that being cared for is a guarantee, you stop negotiating. You start operating. It's a different energy entirely. Now your actions don't wobble under pressure. Now your ambition doesn't bend to loneliness. Now your path isn't altered by rejection. You are no longer playing a game with others. You are building a game that others are forced to play. And the fewer people you expect to care, the more dangerous you become. Because now, you're not slowed down by the emotional bureaucracy that governs most lives. You don't stop to explain. You don't pause to reassure. You don't hold hands through their discomfort. You move, and the world is either forced to catch up or collapse in your absence. You become what they call emotionless. But it's not emotionlessness. It's refinement, precision. You still feel, but you feel in solitude. And you use those feelings not to complain, but to engineer, to plan, to punish, to build something no one can take from you again. Because you've learned the most brutal, beautiful truth Machiavelli ever hinted at. You cannot make people care. You can only make them comply. That is the real divide. The weak want emotional justice. The powerful want results. And the sooner you accept that emotional justice is a myth, the faster you gain real control over your life. Not everyone will support you. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will care. So what? What does their care build? What does their understanding protect? What does their sympathy do when you're bleeding out at the top of the mountain? Nothing. It sounds harsh, because it is. But harshness isn't cruelty. It's honesty. The world doesn't run on feelings. It runs on power. And the first form of power is mastery over your own mind. Once you accept that care is a currency you cannot force others to spend, you stop begging for it. You build wealth in other ways: quiet power, ruthless patience, relentless self-discipline, and above all, emotional solitude. Solitude is your forge now. Solitude is your compass. Solitude is your sanctuary. Because in that solitude, you're no longer distracted by the need to be seen. And finally, you can see clearly. You see who is using you, who is testing your boundaries, who only cares when you're useful, who applauds only when the crowd applauds first. And that vision, that clarity, that's the sword Machiavelli was sharpening all along. Once you accept no one cares, you stop romanticizing loyalty from strangers. You stop feeling betrayed when people fall silent. You stop waiting for people to reach out. Instead, you turn inward, not to hide, but to sharpen. And from that sharpening comes something no one expects from the quiet man in the corner: dominance. Because when the crowd sees someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, and doesn't depend, they start to orbit, they lean in, they get curious. And suddenly, the same world that once ignored you starts to whisper your name. He never begged. He never complained. He never crumbled. And now that you're unshakable, they offer the very care they once withheld. But by then, you don't need it. You already built without it. You already bled without it. You already became everything you needed to become in the dark. This is the Machiavellian truth. People only care once you prove you don't need them to. And even then, their care is a byproduct, not a requirement. You move with or without it. You win with or without it. You survive with or without it. And once people realize that you've already made peace with being alone, they stop seeing you as vulnerable. They start seeing you as inevitable. And in this world, inevitable is the only identity worth having. Now, when someone ignores you, it doesn't shake you, it reveals them. When someone withdraws their support, it doesn't destroy you, it exposes their limits. When someone tries to punish you with silence, you welcome it. It's where you live. This is how you break the cycle of emotional slavery. You stop interpreting apathy as loss and start interpreting it as training. Every time someone didn't care, they made you sharper. Every time someone didn't show up, they gave you time to build alone. Every time the world stayed silent, it pushed you deeper into the only voice that matters, your own. And now you don't flinch. You don't ask. You don't explain. You enforce. Your boundaries are law. Your movement is quiet. Your standards are non-negotiable. And the ones who didn't care, they'll care soon enough. when they realize they don't have access to the man who doesn't need them. Because when you accept no one cares, you take back your power. When you take back your power, you stop waiting. And when you stop waiting, you become the one they wait for. And you never go.